Hello everybody, my name is Zen, and I got to play a lot of the technical alpha for Diablo II Resurrected. So in this video, we're going to be talking about what this remaster is, what you can expect from it, everything going on in the background and how it works the way that it does, and just my general thoughts about it. But I am going to be uploading a separate video with my feedback on it that is going to go to the devs, because I do have some like minor things here and there that I want to provide specific feedback on. But overall, my overall opinion, right, is that it is excellent. I think Resurrected is one of the best remasters I have ever played. But before we dive in and get started, I do want to thank Blizzard for giving me early access to the technical alpha. I got access on Thursday as opposed to Friday when everybody else got access. And it was a huge, awesome opportunity for us in the channel. If you missed it, I did live stream for like almost 5 hours worth of content over the first 2 days of the technical alpha. I will put a link to the live stream in the comments, so in case you want to go and check those out, you could totally go look at the VODs. Otherwise, this is going to be my summarized thoughts about the game. So diving right in, Diablo II Resurrected is a remaster of the original Diablo II, which came out in the year 2000, June 29th, 2000, which was 20 years ago. Like, think about that for a second. This is a 20-year-old game that had a massive impact on the state of video games for, the following 20 years. Diablo 2 continues to be incredibly influential in the action RPG, the isometric action RPG genre. You look at things like Path of Exile, they take a lot of inspiration from Diablo 2 for many reasons. It is an excellent game, at its base, and that is what causes this to be a really good remaster. And that is because Diablo 2, at its core, was an excellent game. It has some dated ideas compared to, isometric RPGs that are out nowadays. Diablo 3 definitely makes the combat feel much different, much more modern. So do other action RPGs that are out there. But when it comes to the ideas and the feel and everything about Diablo 2, it is without a shadow of a doubt iconic. This remaster is being developed by Vicarious Visions in combination with Blizzard. If you don't know who Vicarious Visions is, it's an excellent company that has done some incredible remasters already within recent time, like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, Crash Bandicoot, and the Spyro Reignited trilogy. So they've gone through and just done some excellent stuff recently, and they have a pretty nice catalog outside of that as well. That being said, Vicarious Visions was recently acquired or merged or whatever you want to call it with Activision Blizzard, and now is a part of Blizzard itself. So it is still being done by that team, but that team is now also considered part of the Blizzard teams. But that's a good thing, because when you look at recent remasters, or rather remakes in many sense, that Blizzard has done, I'm looking at Warcraft 3 Reforged. There were some issues there, and that was basically doomed from the start of that project. It was a good idea, but it does have a lot of issues. Those issues are not necessarily going to arise for Diablo 2 Resurrected. So let me just satiate those concerns right off the bat. They have done an excellent job so far with what we've seen. Right now, it was single player only, and it was Acts 1 and 2. But the reason why it is done so well is because of the way that the remaster actually functions. Running in the background is old Diablo 2. And in fact, the coolest part about this is at any given point, you can switch between the new updated graphics and the old game, just on the fly. So if you're on PC and you happen to get into a technical alpha, or you're in technical alpha right now and you don't know about it, you just hit G on your keyboard and it'll swap immediately to the old game. You'll see me doing it in the footage in the background every now and then, and it is a really, really cool little feature because the way that you capture a feel of an iconic game with the movement and the combat is you literally can't really touch it. So the way that they've done that is make it so that game is actually running in the background and it just has all this fancy stuff on the top of it. It's done flawlessly. Like that's the best way to put it, because it's really easy to screw something like that up. Not necessarily the game running in the background and then, getting the data from the old game that way, but it's really easy to screw up, the up-resing of assets and the essentially remaking of a lot of those assets into 3D models and making them look really good. It is very difficult to do and be faithful to the idea, not necessarily the look, but the idea of what you remember it looking like. And this is where, in my opinion, Resurrected just is a 10 out of 10. In fact, I think it's higher than that. It's like an 11 or 12 out of 10. It is perfectly done. The team has somehow managed to capture the look and the feel of Diablo 2, not as it was, but as it is how we remember it. And that is a very, 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 very specific distinction, because you could take, some of these old assets and you can switch back to the old game, but you don't necessarily, get a one-to-one remake of this stuff. It has some artistic expression on the models or the environment and how this stuff works. You'll be running around and you'll see a doodad in Resurrected and you're like, ooh, that looks really cool. What did that look like before? And you'll switch and it's not even there. None of that thing existed, but your brain filled in back then what the game looked like. Your brain used its own imagination to fill in the gaps. And when you look back on a 20-year-old game 20 years later, you do kind of make stuff up in your brain. So the way that they've managed to make this game look, it looks how I remember the game looking without it actually looking that way. And that is a accomplishment that cannot be understated. And it's enhanced by the fact that at any given point, you could switch between the old and the new graphics. And I love that so much. If you don't know how Diablo 2 works, like the old game, it actually runs on a grid. So that's how you get like the kind of stilted movement. It also had an FPS cap, which was rather low, and the new graphics run at a much higher frame rate. But that gets a little complicated because of how the cycles work. I'm going to explain this in the most simpleton way possible, but hopefully we don't spend too much time on this. Essentially, it was like a ticking clock in the background of, Diablo 2, where all of your abilities would have to fall on these different clock, ticks. But that tick is essentially bound to what the frame rate was back then. And if you sped those ticks up, it would ruin the feel of the game. You can also, during BlizzCon, they described it as like bike spokes. If you spun a wheel, each spoke on the wheel is a time that abilities will land. And if you know anything about World of Warcraft Classic, it's kind of the same concept. Like things would land at certain times, so you would have to get to certain breakpoints in Diablo 2 in order to make your ability to land slightly faster or slightly slower, depending on what you were trying to do, because you wanted it to land on those bike spokes as they would come up as the wheel was turning. Right, same thing with like the ticking clock. But the way that they handle that is they just have Diablo 2 running in the background, which means that doesn't change. It still is occurring. You still get the combat feel and breakpoints that still exist, but just the game is now running at a higher frame rate with the graphic stuff on top and the dynamic lighting, which is beautiful. I'll talk about that in a moment. And it feels smoother, it feels quicker, but it doesn't change how the combat feels. And that, again, something that cannot be understated. Like, that is an excellent accomplishment that the team has absolutely nailed. But let's quickly shift focus to the dynamic lighting, because I think that this is definitely an MVP of the new graphics system. So the cool thing is, you'll open up like a town portal and the portal just glows and whatnot. And if you're walking past it and you happen to have like metallic armor on, it reflects off the armor and it looks excellent. And just like little tiny things in the environment that have lights on it now just look way better, because it affects the stuff around it, where in the old games they didn't have dynamic lighting, so it was just like little sprites, and that was just how it worked. But when you consider certain classes, such as the Paladin, which isn't available in this first technical alpha, it's just the Sorceress, the Barbarian, and the Amazon. But if you consider like the things like the Paladin or the Sorceress, you get really cool spell effects from these characters, and them having dynamic lighting is awesome. Like me playing a Sorceress in the background, you see that, the lightning lights everything up as it goes, and it just looks so freaking cool. And I love that, especially once again, because you can switch to the old graphics and be like, oh yeah, I remember how their sprites looked. That, they were cool back then, but oh my goodness, do they look really cool in this new engine. And at the end of the day, it also is a good thing that it is giving me Diablo 4 vibes, because I am a very fortunate individual to have been able to play Diablo 4 back at BlizzCon when it was announced. And the thing is, the Sorceress in that Diablo 4 demo reminds me of playing a Sorceress here. That's right away a good connection to make, because Diablo 2 is an excellent game, and if you try to get stuff like that into a new Diablo, you want to make sure that you live up to the hype of the old games, right? But at the same time, the dynamic lighting coming from those abilities that you could do, in Diablo 2 is very similar to how the dynamic lighting was working in the abilities for the Diablo 4 demo. So it looks really, really beautiful in the environment, and the way everything's being lit up is quite nice. Now, people have their own concerns about how Diablo 4 looks. I would just go ahead and say, look at more recent gameplay footage. Also, that game is in development and things are going to change. But for the most part, that game actually does look quite excellent and does remind me a lot of Diablo 2, especially now that we're getting this like upgraded graphic engine and we're going into these dark caves and these dark like dungeons or cathedrals or whatever you want to call it. They look very similar in style and in like dark, gritty, gothic feel. And that is a really good thing too. So having a more unified feel between the Diablo games with Diablo 3 being a bit of a standout on that one, I think that is a good thing. Diablo 4 is very clearly going back to the Diablo 2 roots as far as look and style, because we go into this remake or remaster rather, and it looks very similar in tone, in darkness, and in like goriness, but obviously far more upgraded, and it just has its own voice, I think is the best way to put it. And when it comes to Resurrected, there are certain things that they have decided to add or change, and I am all for it, because I think that a lot of those things that they have decided to add or change are stuff that need to be there. And the first one that I could see people kind of having their own very opinionated thoughts about is the auto gold pickup, which you can turn off or on depending on what's going on. The reason it's there is because it actually makes the console version of the game. Yes, it is coming to console, and the controller support is excellent. Actually works way better than you might imagine. I finally got a chance to test it yesterday. But the thing is, having it on console, it does mean that it is kind of a pain in the butt to go and constantly pick up all these items with a controller, even though it does work pretty well in the current implementation of it. But when it goes to, gold, that's an entirely additional thing to have to pick up that is a lot more spamming of buttons and whatnot. Auto gold pickup just makes sense. It works really well in Diablo 3. I don't need to sit there and click on every freaking pile of gold. I'm sorry. If you're a purist and you really want to do that, go for it, man. Just chuck off that auto gold pickup, and then you'll be good to go. But for me, it just makes sense to have it in. It's a nice quality of life feature, right? There's other things that they've done, like there's going to be global play for the ladders, which I think is really nice. So no more regions. You're not going to be able to play on US West, but you won't be able to play with your friends who are playing on US East because of the way that the servers worked. There's also no more character decays. If you didn't know, 20 years ago, the way data was stored on servers and the size of the server drives and everything just essentially meant that they had to have a server decay so that they weren't filling up, on these characters that everybody's making and then just abandons and never plays again. So your characters, after you were offline for quite a bit of time on them, they would just disappear. But now that is not going to be the case. Your characters will continue to exist. So there's also cross progression with console. So you can, be playing on your PC and get, all the way through Act 1 on the first night. But maybe you have to go on a trip on night 2 of release and you want to go start Act 2, well, you can absolutely do that if you have a Nintendo Switch and you're traveling and maybe you're on a plane and you want to play some Diablo 2 on your Switch. That would be totally rad. There is also offline online modes, but a really nice thing that they're adding is a shared stash. They didn't have a shared stash back in Diablo 2, but people kind of had stash characters already that they would go and drop all their items on the floor with a trusted buddy who would pick them up, and then you would switch characters and then jump back in, and maybe your buddy would pick them all up and then like re-enter your game. It was just like a complicated thing of just getting all of your items on one trash character that was essentially your bank, which you were using for a shared stash between all your characters. But now you don't have to do that because you just have a shared stash, so you don't have to worry about griefing or anything like that. And I think that is excellent, right? There are certain things that they are adding that just need to be there. Accessibility options, for example, or options when it comes to using a controller. I can only say countless things that should be added. Things that don't affect how the game is remembered, or how you remember it being, or anything that affects the gameplay of Diablo 2 in a significant way that is like, they're not changing how charms work, for example. No, they're going through and they're making logical changes that make sense for a game that is 20 years old, and they're remastering it, and they're just adding a lot of quality of life stuff that should have been there to begin with. And honestly, the final thing that I wanted to mention, because I know it's going to get brought up of people who are disappointed, rightfully so, in Warcraft 3 Reforged and what happened with all that. Well, Diablo 2 is going to have completely remastered cinematics, which I think is excellent. There's the cinematics. If you look at the old D2 cinematics, they're rough, but they are going to have completely remastered cinematics. I would show one or two of them in this video, but they are in a placeholder stage at the moment. They're not the way that they're going to look when the game is released, so there's no reason to go look at that. There's also things that we couldn't test, like we couldn't test multiplayer or how any of that would work, just because at the end of the day, it's a single player test at the moment. So we just don't have to access to how any of that will work. I can't test my favorite class, the best class in the game, the assassin. Am I right? Who's an assassin player? I love my assassin. Everybody really needs to try playing an assassin. But like Necromancer wasn't there, or Druid, or anything like that. The game is also, I've mentioned the assassin and the Druid. It is launching with Lords of Destruction, and the game will be on the most recent Diablo 2 patch. So anything that you remember from, the most recent patch, if you've played, I don't know, anytime within the last year, then things are going to be running on that same patch. So that's just how that's all going to work. I think that overall, Vicarious Visions has done an excellent job. Blizzard has done an excellent job of merging that into the company, because those people are obviously and pretty clearly superbly skilled at remastering and remaking games. And this is a faithful adaptation to Diablo 2. I personally cannot wait to have friends who never played Diablo 2 jump in and play it, because they are going to be surprised, very surprised, I think, at how well the game holds up, especially with the new graphics engine on top of it. If you have any Diablo 2 or Resurrected questions, leave them in the comments, and I will try to get to them as quickly as possible. There's other people who will be lurking around who would gladly answer your questions, I'm sure, as well. But I think this is easily the most exciting game that's coming out this year at the moment, and I'm really looking forward to jumping in and just completely no-lifing it for quite a while, because that's what I did back in 2000 when it first came out, and I can't wait to do that once again. If you're new to the channel, I upload daily videos and have been doing so for nearly 10 years now, and that has been a long road, but an exciting one. So consider subscribing if you want to see more videos, and definitely like this video if you liked it. Helps out the channel quite a bit. I'm trying to fight the YouTube algorithm boss, and let's just say it's been very difficult lately. With all of that being said, though, thank you all for watching, and we shall see you guys next time.